They believed she was merely another frail elder they could intimidate into silence. They failed to grasp that the fractured concrete of that driveway would soon be marred by more than just innocent life's crimson. When Sheriff Grady and his constables violently entered the modest, sunlit dwelling on Elm Street, they saw themselves as the aggressors. Little did they know that house was home to the mother of a phantom, a high-tier operative who had pursued warlords in the Hindu Kush and dismantled terrorist networks in the planet's most shadowed recesses. As the gunshot reverberated, cleaving the tranquil Sunday morning, the officers remained unaware that their actions constituted more than mere criminality. They had effectively sealed their own fates. The individual approaching the driveway was not simply a bereaved son. He was a living instrument of war, and he had just returned home. The oppressive heat in Oak Haven, Georgia, was already intensifying, causing the asphalt to shimmer like a mirage, though it was merely 900 hours in the diminutive, impeccably maintained yellow house at the terminus of Elm Street. The atmosphere was perfumed with cinnamon, nutmeg, and yeast. Clara Vance hummed a low, soulful melody as she worked the dough for her celebrated Sunday rolls. At 72 years of age, Clara was the vital pulse of the Southside populace. She was the woman who mended buttons on church attire, who delivered nourishing broth during widespread flu outbreaks, and whose stern gaze could compel a grown man to avert his eyes in shame. She had resided in Oak Haven her entire existence, a township where the railway tracks still served as a stark, dividing line, segregating the respectable from the less so, distinctions that bore little resemblance to crime statistics and everything to do with the complexion of the inhabitants. Clara, dabbing her floral-patterned hands on her apron, glanced out the window. Her hydrangeas were in bloom, their substantial azure heads swaying gently in the light breeze. A wistful smile touched her lips as she contemplated her son, Marcus. She had not seen Marcus in 4 years. He was unable to disclose his whereabouts or his activities, only that his work was in service to the government. She understood the implications of this. Or, at least, she understood enough to offer her prayers. Every night she implored the Lord for his protection, beseeching him to shield him from the world's malevolence. She was unaware that Marcus Vance had evolved into one of the most lethal individuals on Earth. A master sergeant in the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. To the wider world, he was an enigma. To Clara, he was simply her cherished child who had a fondness for peach cobbler. "He will be here by midday," she murmured to the silent kitchen, consulting the clock. Meanwhile, at the precinct, a contrasting agenda was taking shape. Sheriff Bogard Bo Grady occupied his seat, his boots propped upon his desk, a toothpick masticated between his teeth. He was a man who brandished his badge as a symbol of authority and his firearm as an emblem of power. For 2 decades, Grady had governed Oak Haven as his personal domain. Any favor he sought was granted. Any obstacle he wished removed simply vanished. And at this moment, Clara Vance presented a significant complication. __0_Grady inquired, without diverting his gaze as Deputy Vance, an unrelated individual to Clara, but a jittery young man named Kyle Vance, entered. __1__Kyle stammered. __2__. Grady swung his legs off the desk, his countenance flushing a deep, furious crimson. __3_______4__. A different voice interjected. It belonged to Deputy Snake Eubanks, a man with frigid eyes and a history of excessive force complaints that had inexplicably disappeared from his record. __5__. Grady smirked, opening his desk drawer and retrieving a small sealed plastic bag containing a white powder. __6__. Grady tossed the bag to Snake. __7__. Clara had just placed the rolls in the oven when the first siren wailed. It was not the distant passing siren of an ambulance on the highway. It was the sharp, aggressive cry of a police cruiser turning onto her street, followed by another. Then came the heavy rumble of the department's armored SWAT vehicle, a ludicrous surplus acquisition Grady employed to intimidate the neighborhood. Clara frowned, wiping her hands. She walked to the front door, her heart giving an unusual little flutter. She opened it just as 3 cruisers screeched to a halt on her lawn, their tires tearing into the very grass she had watered the previous day. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. Sheriff Grady emerged from the lead vehicle, adjusting his belt. He did not resemble a law enforcement officer. He appeared as a man arriving to collect a debt. Snake Eubanks flanked him, an AR-15 rifle held across his chest, his finger resting perilously close to the trigger guard. "Sheriff Grady," Clara called out, her voice trembling but audible. "What is the meaning of this? You are destroying my lawn." "Clara Vance," Grady bellowed, disregarding her. "Step onto the porch with your hands where I can see them. We possess a warrant to search these premises for narcotics." Clara froze. "Narcotics?" "Sheriff, you know me. I have baked pies for the church auction for 30 years. I know nothing of narcotics." "Do not deceive me, old woman," Grady shouted, his hand resting on his holstered pistol. "We have credible intelligence. Snake, secure the perimeter. Kyle, get the battering ram. You will not breach my door." Clara stepped forward, her indignation overriding her apprehension. "I have a son returning home today. I will not have you ransacking my house based on a falsehood." "Your son?" Grady guffawed, a cruel barking sound. "That runaway? He is not coming. And if he does, we shall apprehend him as well. Now, get down on the ground." Clara stood resolute. She was 5 feet 4 inches tall, her stature diminished by age. But in that instant, she seemed colossal. "I will not. I am a citizen, and I demand to see this warrant." Grady's patience evaporated. The heat, the defiance, the knowledge of the developer's pressure, it all culminated. "I said, get down." He charged up the steps. Clara instinctively raised a hand to ward him off. Grady backhanded her. The sound was sickeningly resonant. Clara stumbled backward, striking the doorframe, a trickle of blood appearing from her lip. "Mama!" a neighbor cried out from across the street, but Snake Eubanks leveled his rifle at the onlookers. "Get back inside, or you're next." Clara, dazed, clutched her face. You devil," she hissed. "That's assaulting an officer," Grady snarled. He drew his service weapon, a substantial .45 caliber pistol. "I feared for my life," he intoned, uttering the incantations he believed would absolve him of all responsibility. "Sheriff, wait," Kyle yelled, witnessing the derangement in his superior's eyes. But Grady was beyond reason. He intended to demonstrate to this neighborhood precisely who held dominion. He raised the firearm. Clara met his gaze. She did not implore. She simply looked at him with profound disappointment. Bang. The shot echoed through the humid morning air, silencing the birds, silencing the wind. Clara Vance slumped back against her front door, a crimson bloom spreading across the fabric of her floral Sunday dress. She slid down onto the porch, her eyes fixed upon the azure sky, the light receding from them. Quote, _27 Snake hissed, though he maintained his rifle's aim on the street. "You didn't have to shoot her." "She reached for a weapon," Grady declared loudly, his voice betraying a slight tremor as he attempted to construct the narrative. "You saw it." "Snake." She reached for her waistband. It was a clean shot. Grady bent down to place the drop gun, a tarnished, snub-nosed revolver he kept in his ankle holster, for precisely such predicaments near Clara's lifeless hand. It was then that they heard it. It was not a siren. It was not a scream. It was the sound of a high-performance engine unleashing its fury, pushed to its absolute mechanical limit. A black Ford F-150 Raptor, coated in dust, executed a controlled drift around the corner at 60 miles per hour. It vaulted the curb, demolishing the white picket fence and skidding to a halt a mere 10 feet from the police cruisers. The driver's door sprang open before the truck had even settled on its suspension. A man emerged. He stood 6 feet 4 inches, powerfully built like a bulwark, clad in simple denim, robust boots, and a fitted olive green t-shirt that strained against muscles honed through years of conflict. He wore sunglasses, but even through the lenses, the palpable aura of his rage was evident. Marcus Vance had arrived. He stood beside the truck, his head tilting slightly as he surveyed the porch. He observed the bloodstain. He saw the woman who had taught him to fasten his shoelaces lying broken upon the wooden planks. He saw Sheriff Grady towering over her, a smoking weapon in one hand and a planted firearm in the other. For a fleeting moment, the world ceased to exist. Grady looked at Marcus. He perceived a large, angry black man, and his ingrained prejudices filled in the missing details. He did not see the Delta Force operative. He did not recognize the insignia on the duffel bag in the truck bed. He merely saw another troublemaker. "Get back in the vehicle, boy," Grady shouted, raising his weapon toward Marcus. "This is an active crime scene. Step back, or you will meet the same fate as her." Marcus remained silent. He uttered no shout. He shed no tears. He reached into the truck and withdrew an object that, while not a firearm, was far more terrifying in his grasp. A tactical tomahawk, its steel glinting in the sun. He began to advance, not running, but walking, a steady, measured, predatory stride. "I said stop!" Grady yelled, his hand now trembling. He fired a warning shot into the dirt near Marcus's feet. Marcus did not even flinch. He continued his advance. Sheriff Bo Grady had discharged his weapon in anger on numerous occasions, typically at fleeing suspects or frightened canines during raids, but he had never fired in genuine, primal terror until that moment. As Marcus maintained his relentless approach, the tomahawk held loosely at his side, Grady aimed for the center mass of the colossal figure, his hands, usually so steady when intimidating shopkeepers, now quivering uncontrollably. He squeezed the trigger of his .45. Blam, blam. 2 shots tore up the earth mere inches from Marcus's boots. Marcus did not falter. He did not dive for cover. He simply shifted his weight. A subtle, fluid motion that appeared almost nonchalant. Yet, it covered 10 feet in the blink of an eye. He was no longer merely walking. He was flowing towards them like liquid mercury. Snake Eubanks, recovering from his initial shock, swung his AR-15 toward Marcus. "Drop it! Drop it, or I'll cut you in half." Snake had dedicated years to tactical training on weekends in gravel pits, engaging stationary paper targets. Marcus Vance had spent the preceding decade storming compounds where every inhabitant was highly trained, heavily armed, and actively attempting to kill him. The disparity in their reaction times was measured in life and death. Before Snake could align his sights, Marcus was upon him. He did not swing the tomahawk blade first. Instead, he employed the flat of the steel head, striking Snake's rifle barrel with a resounding impact, sending it skyward. In the same fluid motion, Marcus closed the distance within Snake's guard. A powerful elbow connected with Snake's jaw with a sickening crack. Snake's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed onto the pavement, his rifle clattering uselessly beside him. Young Deputy Kyle Vance, who had never desired any involvement in this affair, fumbled with his holster, overcome with dread. Marcus halted, turning his head slowly to regard the young man. Behind the sunglasses, Marcus's eyes were terrifyingly devoid of emotion. It was the look of a man deciding whether one was a target or merely an obstruction. Quote, _35, Marcus stated. The word was quiet, level, and carried more weight than a shout. Kyle froze, his hand hovering over his firearm. He hyperventilated, glanced at Clara Aara's body on the porch, then back at the monstrous figure before him, and subsequently raised his hands in surrender, stepping aside. That left Grady. The sheriff was scrambling backward, stumbling over the curb, his polished boots scuffing in the dirt. He had lost his weapon in the commotion. He was on his back, crab-walking away like a frightened child as Marcus loomed over him, eclipsing the sun. You listen to me, boy," Grady spluttered, attempting to reclaim a semblance of authority. "You're in a world of trouble. That woman, she pulled a gun. It was justifiable." Marcus remained silent. He reached down, grasping the front of Grady's expensive, custom-tailored uniform shirt in one fist, hoisting the 250-pound man to his feet as if he weighed nothing. He slammed Grady against the side of the armored SWAT vehicle. Marcus leaned in close. He detected the stale coffee, the sweat of fear, and the underlying corruption of a man who had never been denied. Quote, _38, Marcus whispered, his voice like grinding stones. Quote, _39, He released Grady, who slumped to the ground, weeping. Marcus did not strike him. Hitting him at this juncture would have been too facile, too swift. He turned his back on the sheriff, dismissing him as a non-entity, and walked toward the porch. The silence that descended upon Elm Street was profound. The neighbors, previously cowed by Grady's rifles, began to emerge from their homes, drawn by a tragedy that felt sickeningly familiar, yet entirely distinct due to the man now kneeling on the porch. Marcus secured the tomahawk at the small of his back. He knelt beside Clara. The fury that had fueled his dismantling of the deputies dissipated, replaced by a crushing, suffocating sorrow that felt like a physical blow to his chest. He gently touched her face. Her skin was still warm. A flower from the morning's baking, dusted on her cheek, was now mingled with blood. Quote, _40, he whispered, his voice cracking, suddenly sounding like that of a young boy. Quote, _41, _. He checked for a pulse he knew was absent. He checked her airway. A futile reflex from his medical training. The shot had been a kill shot, directly through the heart. Quote, _42, he told himself. It was a small, bitter solace. He carefully straightened her dress, covering her legs. He took her flour-dusted hand in his large, calloused ones, bowing his head. For 2 minutes, the Tier 1 operative, the Phantom, sat and wept silently over the woman who had instilled in him the difference between right and wrong. Then, the sirens began to multiply. Marcus lifted his head. He drew a deep breath, compartmentalizing his grief, locking it away in a steel vault within his mind for later consideration. Now, there was work to be done. He stood, removing his sunglasses and hooking them into his shirt collar. His eyes were now dry and hard as flint. He glanced down at the planted snub-nosed revolver near her hand. He withdrew a handkerchief from his pocket, carefully picked up the gun by the trigger guard, and ejected the cylinder. Fully loaded, with no discharge casings, he pocketed the firearm. Evidence secured, he turned to face the street as 4 state trooper cruisers and 2 unmarked black SUVs tore around the corner, lights flashing. The cavalry had arrived, but Marcus knew with a sickening certainty that they were not there for him. They were there for Grady. The scene dissolved into organized pandemonium. The Georgia state troopers disembarked from their vehicles, shotguns at the ready. They observed a fallen sheriff, an unconscious deputy, and a heavily built black man standing over a body on the porch. Their training kicked in. Colored by the prejudices that plagued the region, quote, _43, only the lead trooper, Captain Sterling Thorne, a man with sharp features and calculating eyes, noted that the suspect was not behaving like a suspect. He was not fleeing. He was not shouting. He stood at parade rest, observing their approach. Marcus analyzed the threat landscape. 12 troopers, 4 agents in the SUVs, likely GBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, or perhaps federal agents drawn by the radio chatter. He could neutralize 4 or 5 of them before they subdued him, but that was not the mission. The mission was truth. The mission was to dismantle Grady's empire, not merely Grady himself. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus sank to his knees, interlacing his fingers behind his head. As they swarmed him, cuffing him roughly, Grady began to shriek from his position against the armored truck. "He's insane! He attacked us! That woman was operating a trap house for the Kings. She drew a weapon on me. Captain Thorne, it was a clean shot. And then her psychopathic son arrived and attempted to kill us all. Look what he did to Snake." Captain Thorne approached Grady, signaling for paramedics to attend to the sheriff's complaints about his wrist. Thorne's gaze fell upon Clara's body on the porch, then shifted back to Marcus, who was being helped to his feet by 2 burly troopers. Thorne walked over to Marcus. He was a political operative, a man whose ambition far surpassed his moral compass. He saw a situation requiring swift resolution before the media helicopters descended. Quote, _45, Thorne inquired, noting the military bearing, the boots, the tactical trousers, quote, _46, quote, _47, quote, _48, Thorne winced internally. This was going to be complicated. Quote, _49, quote, _50, Marcus stated calmly, his eyes locking onto Thorne's. It was a murder scene. Sheriff Grady murdered my mother in cold blood and planted a weapon on her. I have secured that weapon as evidence. Thorne's eyes narrowed. Quote, 52, he turned to his troopers. Quote, 53, as they escorted Marcus toward a cruiser. He looked back one last time at his mother's house. The front door stood ajar, revealing the cozy living room where she had watched Jeopardy every evening. The aroma of her burning Sunday rolls began to waft out, a final, tragic reminder of the normalcy that had been irrevocably shattered. Grady was being loaded into an ambulance, already spinning his narrative to receptive ears. The blue wall was being erected. The local law enforcement, even those who despised Grady, understood the unspoken code. You protect your own, regardless of who bears the insignia. They would corroborate his story. They would discover the narcotics Grady had planted. They would portray Clara Vance as a criminal mastermind and her son as a PTSD-afflicted brute who had lost control. Marcus sat in the rear of the scorching cruiser, the metal enclosure separating him from the troopers in the front. He closed his eyes. He did not need to see. He could hear them on the radio, orchestrating the deception. They transported him to the county jail, a squat concrete edifice on the town's periphery that reeked of bleach and human despair. They processed him with rough efficiency, fingerprints, mugshot. They confiscated his belt, his boots, his wallet. When the booking officer opened his wallet and discovered the green military identification, he paused. He examined the rank insignia, Master Sergeant, and the unit patches concealed within the fold. His eyes widened slightly. He looked up at Marcus, who was staring through him. The officer swallowed hard, quickly returned the ID to the storage envelope, and completed the paperwork without further comment. He understood that some adversaries are best left undisturbed, even when caged. They confined him to a solitary holding cell, isolated from the general population. It was a concrete box with a steel toilet and a flickering fluorescent light. They intended for him to be alone. Their objective was to break him. Hours bled into one another. Marcus remained seated on the sparse metal cot, immersed in a profound state of contemplation. He meticulously regulated his breathing, intentionally lowering his pulse rate. His mind relentlessly replayed the events that transpired on the porch, dissecting every facet, every minute detail. He was orchestrating an operation. Abruptly, the imposing steel barrier creaked open. A young guard, his face etched with palpable fear, propelled a rudimentary prepaid mobile device across the floor. Captain Thorne's voice, sharp and commanding, declared, "You have your sole permitted call. Make it brief. 5 minutes." The heavy door slammed shut, sealing him once more. Marcus retrieved the phone. He did not contact legal counsel. He did not reach out to his family. Instead, he keyed in a sequence of digits that existed in no public directory, a number that traversed 3 distinct continents before its signal ultimately terminated within a clandestine command center at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. It rang twice. A secure channel hummed to life. "Identify yourself," a voice inquired, its tone precise and efficient. "This is Sierra 1 Actual. Authentication code, Whiskey Tango, Foxtrot, 90, status, black." A pregnant pause ensued on the other end, followed by the distinct rustle of chairs and the rapid clatter of keyboards. The operator's demeanor shifted instantly. Quote, 57, Marcus responded, his voice as frigid as the concrete confines surrounding him. Quote, 58, a beat of disbelief. Quote, 59, quote, 60, Marcus confirmed. Quote, 61, The silence that followed was charged with a perilous intensity. When the operator finally spoke again, his voice was taut with barely suppressed fury. Quote, 62, Marcus's gaze lifted to the flickering overhead light. Quote, 63, quote, 64, quote, 65, Marcus stated. underscore underscore quote underscore 66 underscore 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 quote underscore 67 underscore underscore. Marcus terminated the call and slid the phone back beneath the door. He reseated himself on the cot, folding his hands. The raw grief remained, a colossal wave poised to descend. Yet, the mission had seized control. Grady harbored the conviction that he was the apex predator in this locale. He was soon to comprehend that he was merely prey, awaiting the arrival of the true hunters. As the sun began its descent over Oak Haven, casting elongated crimson shadows across the flaking paint of the county detention facility, Sheriff Bo Grady felt an overwhelming sense of security. He had skillfully manipulated the narrative for the local press, portraying a tragic narcotics raid, a belligerent suspect, and a heroic officer sustaining injuries. The local news outlet, reliant on Grady for exclusive stories, splashed the headline, underscore underscore quote underscore 68 underscore underscore. Within the confines of his office, Grady swigged from a glass of bourbon, while Snake Eubanks, positioned opposite him, cradled an ice pack against his fractured jaw. Underscore underscore quote underscore 69 underscore underscore. Grady slurred, his words slightly muddled. Underscore underscore quote underscore 70 underscore 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 quote underscore 71 underscore underscore. Snake mumbled, wincing. Underscore underscore quote underscore 72 underscore underscore. Grady scoffed, dismissing the concern with a wave of his hand. Underscore underscore quote underscore 73 underscore underscore. At that precise instant, the telephone on Grady's desk rang. It was not the departmental line, it was his personal mobile. A frown creased his brow. Only his wife and his mistress possessed that number. Yeah, he answered. Sheriff Grady, a voice stated, devoid of any inquiry, merely an assertion. The voice possessed a synthesized digital quality, rendering it untraceable. You have precisely 3 hours to tender your resignation and present yourself to federal authorities. Grady emitted a derisive laugh. Who is this? Are you one of those Southside rabble-rousers? I'll trace this call and have you incarcerated by midnight. We are not associated with the Southside, Sheriff. Observe your surroundings. Annoyed, Grady rose and approached the window blinds. He peered out into the station's parking lot. Initially, he perceived nothing amiss. Then, his attention was drawn to them. 4 dark-colored SUVs were positioned across the street, idling in a perfectly formed line. Men stood beside them. They were not in uniform. They were attired in expensive suits, but they bore no resemblance to legal practitioners. They appeared more akin to formidable linebackers confined within tailored Italian wool. Subsequently, a low, resonant thrumming began to vibrate the glass. Grady looked upward. A drone, far more sophisticated than a recreational toy, a military-grade surveillance apparatus, hovered silently 200 feet above the station, its singular red eye blinking intermittently. The synthesized voice resumed. Underscore underscore quote underscore 79 underscore underscore. Grady's blood turned to ice. Who are you? We are the family you never knew Marcus possessed. You harmed our brother. Now, we shall systematically dismantle your existence, brick by brick. The connection abruptly severed. Before Grady could react, the main entrance of the station burst open. It was not an assault, it was an occupation. A man entered, flanked by 2 others. The individual at the center was clad in a meticulously tailored charcoal suit and carried a briefcase that exuded an aura of impregnability, capable of withstanding a nuclear detonation. I am Alexander Cross, the man announced, his voice resonating through the bullpen. I represent Master Sergeant Marcus Vance as legal counsel. I possess a writ of habeas corpus duly issued by the Federal District Court in Atlanta. You are detaining a highly decorated Tier 1 operator on fabricated charges, and if he is not released into my custody within 5 minutes, I shall unleash the full punitive force of the Department of Justice upon this department, resulting in sentences so severe that you will be serving lifetimes in Leavenworth. The deputy stationed at the reception desk, a portly individual named Earl, stammered, You cannot simply barge in here. The sheriff, a new voice interjected, is finished. The 2 individuals flanking the lawyer advanced. They were imposing figures, bearded, and exuding an unnerving sense of calm. These were members of Marcus's Delta team. the legendary Special Operations operative Dutch van der Linde, and the team's expert in demolitions, Pyro Ali. They were not present for combat. Their purpose was escort. Grady erupted from his office, his face a shade of purple. "Get these clowns out of here. Arrest them." Dutch regarded Grady with a smile that held no warmth. "Touch me, Sheriff. Kindly provide me with a justifiable reason." The atmosphere within the station grew thick with palpable menace. Every deputy's hand instinctively gravitated towards their sidearm, yet none dared to draw. They observed Dutch's posture, Pyro's casual yet deliberate scan of the room, identifying potential targets. These were not street thugs. They were apex predators. Quote, 89 Captain Thorne of the State Police commanded, emerging from the rear of the building. He possessed greater acumen than Grady. Recognizing the unmistakable signs of a federal intervention, he directed his gaze at Alexander Cross. Quote, 90 Cross produced the writ, slapping it onto the desk. Quote, 91 Thorne perused the document, his face paling. He turned to Grady. Quote, 92 quote, 93 Grady bellowed. Quote, 94 Cross countered with practiced smoothness. Quote, 95 quote, 96 Grady whispered. Cross withdrew a tablet and presented it. Displayed on the screen was the shaky, high-definition footage captured by the drone that had been loitering above the neighborhood mere minutes after the shooting. Coupled with recovered audio, it unequivocally depicted Grady planting the weapon. It showed Marcus approaching unarmed. It revealed the execution. Quote, 97 Cross stated coldly. Quote, 98 An absolute silence descended upon the station. Grady surveyed his deputies. They were all subtly withdrawing from him. The purported blue wall of solidarity, crumbling under the overwhelming weight of irrefutable truth. Quote, 99 Thorne ordered the jailer. 5 minutes later, the heavy steel door emitted a buzzing sound. Marcus Vance emerged. He appeared precisely as he had upon his entrance, composed, self-possessed, and radiating an aura of menace. He did not acknowledge Grady. He walked directly towards Dutch and Pyro, who embraced him in a powerful, camaraderie-filled hug. Quote, 100 Dutch whispered. Quote, 101 Marcus nodded, his jaw set firmly. Quote, 102 quote, 103 Pyro reported. Quote, 104 Marcus turned to the lawyer. Cross. Quote, 105 as they prepared to depart, Grady, in a desperate and foolish act, shouted, quote, 106 Marcus paused at the threshold. He did not turn around. His voice, amplified sufficiently for all to hear, carried clearly. Quote, 107 the following morning. Oak Haven resembled a city under siege, though not by a military force. It was besieged by the unvarnished truth. The disseminated video had achieved its intended effect. National news vans were parked 3 deep along Main Street. Protesters congregated at the courthouse steps, a diverse assembly of individuals from all walks of life. Clara Vance had been a respected figure within the community, and witnessing her demise captured in high definition had irrevocably shattered the racial divisions that Grady had cynically exploited for decades. However, the true conflict unfolded in the hushed confines of the shadows. Marcus had established a command post within the presidential suite of the town's sole hotel. The 12 Delta operators, who had specifically requested leave for this undertaking, transformed the opulent space into a sophisticated tactical operations center. Laptops hummed, Satellite feeds flickered across multiple monitors, and coffee flowed with relentless abandon. "Status report," Marcus commanded, standing by the window, observing the protesters below. "Financial records have been completely decrypted," reported a tech specialist named Switch. "Grady possesses over $2 million in offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The financial trail directly implicates Oak Haven Development Corporation. Specifically an individual named Richard Sterling, Captain Thorne's cousin." "So Thorne is complicit as well," Marcus murmured. "That explains the cover-up." "We also uncovered something else," Switch continued, his voice lowering. "Phone records. Snake Eubanks made a call 10 minutes prior to the raid to a burner phone. We triangulated the signal. It originated from within Oak Haven High School." Marcus frowned. "The school? Why?" "Not the school," Dutch corrected, gesturing towards a map. "The parking lot. Specifically the vehicle belonging to a local dealer named T-Bone. It appears Grady was not merely planting narcotics. He was sourcing them from the very individuals he claimed to be apprehending. He was compensating them to fabricate evidence for his raids. He was utilizing criminals to entrap innocent property owners to seize their land." Marcus summarized, his voice resonating with the fury burning within him. "It's a RICO case. Racketeering, murder, conspiracy. We possess sufficient evidence to bury them, Cross," the lawyer stated from his position on the couch. "The FBI is en route. Special Agent Harrison. He's a competent individual. I worked with him in D.C. He intends to coordinate the arrests." "No," Marcus declared. Everyone fell silent. "No?" Cross inquired. "Marcus, this is the legal recourse. This is the correct procedure." "The legal path consumes years," Marcus countered, turning from the window. "Grady will secure bail. He will intimidate witnesses. He will threaten the jury. I understand men like him. He perceives himself as untouchable because he wears a badge. If we permit the FBI to apprehend him quietly, he triumphs." "So what is the strategy, Top?" Dutch inquired, cracking his knuckles. "We compel him to reveal his true nature," Marcus stated. "We force a confrontation. Tonight we have the town hall meeting. Grady is scheduled to address the issue of drug-related problems in Oak Haven. He intends to brazen it out. And we will be present." Pyro grinned. "Not just us," Marcus added. "Everyone." That evening, the Oak Haven Community Center was packed beyond its capacity. The air conditioning struggled to cope, and the room was permeated with the mingled sense of perspiration and palpable tension. Sheriff Grady stood at the podium, his brow beaded with sweat under the intense stage lights. He was attempting to reassert control over the public discourse, but the audience was decidedly hostile. "I assure you," Grady boomed into the microphone, "that the video circulating online is a deep fake. It is digital manipulation orchestrated by external agitators to undermine our peace." "Liar!" a voice screamed from the rear of the hall. "She was a saint!" another person yelled. "Quiet!" Grady commanded, striking the podium with his fist. Snake Eubanks and Kyle Vance stood near the stage, their expressions conveying unease. Captain Thorne occupied a front row seat, appearing as though he desperately wished to be anywhere else. Suddenly, the rear doors of the hall swung open with a resounding bang. The room fell into an absolute silence. Marcus entered. He was not attired in his combat gear. He wore his Class A dress blues, the complete military uniform of a master sergeant in the United States Army. His chest was adorned with an array of medals, including the Silver Star, the Bronze Star with Valor, the Purple Heart, and the distinctive tab of the Special Forces. Behind him marched 12 men, all in various dress uniforms representing the Army, Navy SEALs, and Air Force Pararescue. The pack had meticulously cleaned up. They proceeded down the central aisle in perfect synchronicity, the rhythmic cadence of their boots echoing like a drumbeat. The crowd parted before them, as if the Red Sea itself were dividing. Grady froze. He observed the medals, the disciplined bearing, the sheer power radiating from these individuals. He appeared small, insignificant. Marcus halted at the front of the stage. He gazed upward at Grady. "Sheriff," Marcus stated, his voice calm, yet amplified by the profound silence of the assembly. "I am Master Sergeant Marcus Vance, 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment, Delta, and I am placing you under citizen's arrest for the murder of Clara Vance, treason against the Constitution, and racketeering." Grady emitted a high-pitched, nervous laugh. "You cannot arrest me. I am the law." "You are not the law," Marcus countered. "You are a criminal who happens to wear a badge." Marcus turned to address the crowd. He held up a flash drive. "On this drive," he announced, "is every bank transfer, every email, every text message, proving that Sheriff Grady and Captain Thorne have been pilfering your land, planting narcotics on your children, and murdering your neighbors for personal gain." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Captain Thorne stood, his hand reaching for his weapon. "That's enough. Arrest him." "I would strongly advise against that," Dutch's voice boomed. From the balcony, 4 distinct red laser dots appeared superimposed upon Thorne's chest. The pack had deployed snipers in the rafters. "This is over," Marcus declared. "Agent Harrison." From the side wings, a dozen FBI agents, clad in windbreakers and brandishing their weapons, emerged. Special Agent Harrison stepped onto the stage. "Bogard Grady, Sterling Thorne," Harrison announced. "You are under arrest for federal racketeering and civil rights violations resulting in death." Grady frantically scanned for an escape route. He looked towards Snake. Snake dropped his weapon and raised his hands. "I ain't dying for you, B." Grady then turned his attention to the crowd. They were filming, cheering, jeering. Then the cornered rat, trapped in its predicament, lashed out. "I won't let you take me," Grady screamed. He drew his backup firearm from his ankle holster, the only weapon he had left. He did not aim at Marcus. Instead, he aimed at the crowd, specifically targeting a young woman positioned in the front row. His intention was to incite chaos, to take a hostage. However, he had forgotten the individual standing before him. Before Grady's finger could tighten on the trigger, Marcus moved. It was the identical blur of motion witnessed in the driveway, but now imbued with the righteous force of final judgment. He vaulted onto the stage, clearing the 5-foot elevation in a single, astounding bound. Grady fired wildly, the shot ricocheting harmlessly into the ceiling. Marcus's fist connected with Grady's face with a devastating impact. It was a strike delivered with the profound weight of a grieving son and the surgical precision of a master warrior. Grady's nose shattered. He was flung backward, colliding with the podium, sending it toppling. Marcus stood over him. Grady groaned, attempting to reach for his weapon once more. Marcus deliberately placed his boot upon Grady's hand, grinding the bones. Grady screamed. Quote, 150 Marcus whispered, leaning down. Quote, 151 He kicked the discarded weapon away and stepped back as the FBI agents swarmed the stage, apprehending the weeping, broken sheriff. The crowd erupted. It was a deafening roar of liberation, a testament to justice finally served. Marcus did not smile. He observed Captain Thorne being led away in handcuffs. He surveyed the town, which was finally breathing freely. He descended the stage steps, where Dutch was waiting. Quote, 152 Dutch said. Quote, 153 Marcus replied, his gaze fixed on the exit. Quote, 154 The trial of Bogard Grady proved to be the swiftest in the annals of Georgia's federal circuit. The sheer volume and irrefutable nature of the evidence presented rendered his high-priced defense attorneys virtually silent. They understood the futility of their efforts. The jury deliberated for less than 20 minutes. The verdict returned was guilty on all 34 counts, encompassing first-degree murder, racketeering, and civil rights violations. However, the true conclusion did not unfold within the sterile confines of a courtroom. It transpired on a Tuesday morning beneath the expansive oak trees of the Mount Zion Baptist Church Cemetery. It was a funeral befitting a head of state, though Clara Vance would have undoubtedly chided anyone for making such a spectacle. The church was overflowing. Attendees stood 3 deep in the aisles, spilling out onto the lawn where loudspeakers broadcast the service. The entirety of the Southside community was present. Naturally, those individuals whom Clara had nourished, clothed, and supported for 50 years. Yet others were present as well. State senators occupied the front row, their expressions humbled. The newly appointed interim sheriff, a woman named Sarah Jenkins, who had been dismissed by Grady years prior for refusing to falsify a report, stood at attention in her dress uniform. And then there was the pack. Marcus's entire Delta team served as pallbearers. They were attired in their dress blues, white gloves stark against the dark fabric. They carried the mahogany casket with a reverence typically reserved for fallen presidents. To them, Clara Vance was not merely Marcus's mother. She was the genesis of the man their team leader had become. She represented the source of the moral compass that guided them through the darkest of times. Marcus ascended the podium to deliver the eulogy. He appeared transformed. The consuming rage that had fueled the systematic dismantling of Grady's corrupt empire had receded, replaced by a profound, quiet sorrow, yet also a deep sense of peace. Quote, 155, Marcus began, his voice echoing across the hushed assembly. Quote, 156, He gazed down at the casket, adorned with a blanket of pristine white roses. Quote, 157, He looked up, his eyes scanning the crowd, his gaze settling upon the faces of the neighbors who were finally liberated from fear. Quote, 158, As they lowered her into the earth, the air was pierced by a sound that caused everyone to jump, then weep. It was the 21-gun salute rendered by the honor guard. This was not standard protocol for a civilian, but the governor had issued a special decree. Clara Vance was a casualty in a war for the very soul of Oak Haven, and she was interred as a hero. The karmic retribution that befell Grady and his cohorts was nothing short of biblical. Bogard Grady was sentenced to life imprisonment in federal prison with absolutely no possibility of parole. Given his prior experience in law enforcement, he petitioned for safeguarding. However, the judge, a somber figure who had witnessed the recorded execution of Clara Ara, dismissed the appeal. Grady was then transferred to a high-security penitentiary situated in Atlanta. On his initial day among the general inmate population, Grady grasped the full magnitude of his downfall. He was no longer in command. He was no longer the tormentor. He was merely another prisoner clad in an orange uniform, surrounded by individuals who had endured years of subjugation by men precisely like himself. He lived each day in a state of dread, constantly vigilant, a diminished and shattered man confined within a prison of his own design. Captain Sterling Thorne accepted a plea agreement in exchange for his testimony against the developers. He received a sentence of 20 years, forfeiting his pension, his reputation, and his family, who had abandoned him even before the trial commenced. The developer, Richard Sterling, faced financial ruin, overwhelmed by legal expenses, and was subsequently charged with bribery. The Oak Haven Development Corporation was consequently disbanded. Regarding the yellow house situated on Elm Street, Marcus opted not to sell it. He did not seal it off. Instead, he utilized the substantial settlement funds received from the lawsuit against the county, an astonishing $25 million, to revitalize the entire district. The house itself was transformed into the Clara Vance Community Center. The kitchen, where Clara had once prepared her baked goods, was repurposed as an instructional culinary space, with local chefs imparting cooking skills to children. The living room was converted into a public library. The backyard, where the hydrangeas continued to flourish, became a communal garden, offering a serene spot for the elderly to bask in the sun and share their experiences. Marcus remained for 6 months, personally overseeing the construction and ensuring that the pervasive corruption was thoroughly eradicated. He traversed the streets not as an apparition, but as a member of the community. On his final day in Oak Haven, Marcus stood on the veranda of the community center. The freshly painted sign above the entrance read, "The Clara House." Dutch arrived in his truck, the engine humming. He was ready. Top Bird was awaiting them at Fort Benning. Their next assignment was to a desert environment. Marcus cast one last look at the house. He observed a group of children gleefully darting through sprinklers on the lawn, their laughter echoing in the safe environment. He noticed the new sheriff offering a friendly wave as she drove past. He recognized the tranquility his mother had always prayed for, now a tangible reality, achieved through the intense efforts of his retribution. He gently touched the doorframe, as if still sensing the lingering warmth of her hand. Quote, 159, Underscore underscore, Marcus affirmed, turning his back and walking towards the truck. Underscore underscore, quote, underscore 160 underscore underscore. He climbed into the passenger seat. As their vehicle departed, leaving Oak Haven behind, Marcus Vance did not glance back. There was no need. He was aware that back on Elm Street, the hydrangeas were in bloom, the oven was warm, and his mother was finally at profound peace. The spectral presence had returned to its origin, confronted the malevolent, and left behind a haven. And this concludes the account of how a single corrupt sheriff made the grievous error of underestimating a mother's devotion and a son's obligation. It serves as a potent reminder that while justice may be delayed and its perception may be clouded, its arrival, particularly when personified by a Delta Force operative, is decisive and impactful. Clara Vance's enduring spirit is not confined to the edifice bearing her name. It resonates in the profound message that no individual is exempt from the law, and no act of barbarity will go unpunished. If this narrative has resonated with you, if you believe in justice delivered swiftly and wrongdoers receiving their just deserts, please engage with the like button. Your interaction significantly aids the channel's expansion and signals your interest in further such accounts. Remember to disseminate this video among your acquaintances, and ensure you subscribe and activate the notification bell to avoid missing any future uploads. We have an abundance of stories concerning karma, retribution, and vindication on the horizon,